The rain had started as a whisper, the kind that barely dotted the sidewalk, but by the time Mark Turner locked the door of the small grocery store where he worked nights, it had become a relentless downpour. Cold sheets of water slammed against the pavement, turning the streetlights into smeared halos. Mark pulled his thin jacket tighter around himself and glanced at his phone. A missed call from the daycare. His daughter, Lily, would be waiting, probably pretending not to be tired so she wouldn't worry him. He adjusted the straps of his worn backpack and stepped into the rain. Halfway down Maple Street, he noticed a shape near the bus stop, someone slumped on the bench, shoulders hunched, unmoving. At first, Mark assumed it was just another commuter waiting out the storm. But something felt wrong. The buses had stopped running an hour ago. Mark slowed. The man was old, very old. His gray hair was plastered to his forehead, rainwater streaming down his face. He wore a thin coat, far too light for the weather, and his hands shook as he tried to stand. His cane slipped on the wet pavement, clattering to the ground. "Sir," Mark called out, already moving closer. "You okay?" The old man looked up, eyes sharp despite his frail appearance. "I'm fine," he said quickly, pride flaring in his voice. But when he tried to rise again, his knees buckled. Mark caught him just in time. "Easy," Mark said, steadying him. "You're going to fall." The old man exhaled, defeated. "Just needed a moment." Mark glanced around. The street was empty. The rain was merciless. Leaving him there didn't sit right. Not when Lily's face flashed in his mind, how she always told him, "Daddy, you help people because that's what heroes do." "Where are you headed?" Mark asked. The man hesitated. "The old apartment building on 7th. I thought I could walk it." "That's a long way in this weather," Mark said. He picked up the cane and placed it firmly in the man's hand. "Come on, I'll help you get there." The old man studied him for a long second, as if weighing something invisible. Finally, he nodded. "Thank you." They moved slowly, rain soaking them both. Mark offered his arm, and the man accepted it reluctantly. Each step seemed to cost him effort, but he didn't complain. "What's your name?" Mark asked. "Henry," the man replied. "Henry Whitaker." "I'm Mark." They walked in silence for a few blocks, the sound of rain filling the space between them. When they reached the apartment building, a tired brick structure with flickering lights, Mark felt relief wash over him. "Here we are," Mark said. Henry didn't move right away. He looked up at the building, then back at Mark. "You didn't have to do this." Mark shrugged. "Someone would have helped me if it were Lily out here with me." "Feels right." Henry's expression softened at the mention of Lily. "You have a child, a daughter, 6 years old, smartest kid I know." Henry smiled faintly. "You're doing something right, then." Mark helped him inside and made sure he was steady before turning to leave. His clothes were soaked, his shoes squelched, and he was now running late. But as he stepped back into the rain, he felt lighter somehow. Behind him, Henry watched, eyes thoughtful. The next morning began like most mornings in Mark's life, rushed, loud, and fueled by cheap coffee. Lily sat at the small kitchen table, swinging her legs as she ate cereal. "Daddy," she said, "you're wet." "That's because I forgot to tell the rain to stop," Mark replied, smiling. She giggled. "You should have told it nicely. I'll remember that next time." He walked her to daycare, kissed her forehead, and headed home to change before catching a few hours of sleep. The exhaustion settled in as soon as he lay down. A loud knock jolted him awake. Mark checked the time. Late morning. No one ever came by. He pulled on a hoodie and opened the door. 2 men in dark suits stood in the hallway, rainwater still clinging to their polished shoes. Between them was Henry, but this wasn't the same Henry. The frail old man from the night before now stood tall, posture straight, wearing a tailored coat that probably cost more than Mark's monthly rent. His eyes were the same, sharp, assessing, but now there was something else there. Authority. "Good morning, Mark," Henry said calmly. Mark stared, stunned. Morning. We'd like to come in," Henry said gently. Mark stepped aside, confusion buzzing in his head. The men entered, surveying the modest apartment, the second-hand couch, the scattered toys, the framed photo of Mark and Lily at the park. Henry gestured to the couch. Sure," Mark said, still trying to process what was happening. Henry sat, his movements controlled and confident. "Last night, you helped me when you had no reason to. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't expect anything." Mark rubbed the back of his neck. "I just didn't want you getting hurt." Henry nodded. "Exactly. One of the men stepped forward and handed Mark a thick envelope. Mark didn't take it. "What's this?" he asked cautiously. "An apology," Henry said. "For the test." "Test," Henry sighed. "I learned a long time ago that power attracts the wrong kind of people. I wanted to know if kindness still existed when there was nothing to gain." Mark's stomach tightened. "I don't understand." Henry met his gaze. "I own Whitaker Industries." The name hit Mark like a wave. Whitaker Industries, construction, energy, technology. A giant, a company that decided the fate of entire neighborhoods. "I didn't know," Mark said quietly. "That's why it mattered," Henry replied. "If you had known, it wouldn't have meant the same thing." The men stood silently, like statues. Henry leaned forward. "Tell me about your job." Mark hesitated, then answered honestly. "I work nights at a grocery store. Used to be an engineer before my wife passed. Took what I could to keep things stable for Lily." Henry's eyes narrowed slightly. "An engineer?" "Yes, sir." Henry smiled. "Then this is more than a thank you." He nodded to one of the men, who pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. "Inside is an offer," Henry said. "A position at Whitaker Industries. Flexible hours, full benefits, and daycare support." Mark's heart pounded. "Why?" "Because power should be used to lift people who already lift others," Henry said. "And because my company could use someone who remembers what it's like to walk in the rain." Mark swallowed hard. I don't know what to say." Henry stood. "Say yes or no. Either way, I'll respect it." Mark thought of Lily, of nights counting change, of helping a stranger because it felt right. "Yes," Mark said. Henry extended his hand. "Then welcome." They shook hands, and just like that, everything changed. Weeks later, Mark stood in a bright office, sunlight streaming through the windows. Lily visited after school, proudly showing everyone her drawings. Mark worked hard, not because of the paycheck, but because he knew why he was there. One evening, as he tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him. "Daddy," she said, "did the rain listen to you?" Mark smiled. "I think it did, because sometimes, all it takes is one kind moment in a storm, for power to find its way back to you."